These are the documented ways Las Vegas casinos quietly handle serious incidents on the Strip, and why many of the city's most troubling scandals never become public. This video explains how casinos contain problems internally, using systems that appear again and again in lawsuits, settlements, and regulatory records, which is why tourists often leave without ever knowing what happened around them. That system is deliberate, and once it's understood, the way modern Vegas feels starts to make sense. Inside a Las Vegas casino, the first response to a serious incident is almost never law enforcement. Casino security takes control immediately, and that matters because the first report created is internal rather than public. Civil lawsuits filed against Strip properties repeatedly show the same starting point, where incident documentation begins with casino security logs rather than police reports, which means the earliest version of events stays inside the company. Internal reports are not public records. Police reports are, and that difference gives casinos control over how an incident is described, categorized, and escalated. Security determines where an incident is logged, how witnesses are handled, and when outside authorities are contacted, which means the tone of the entire case is often set before police ever arrive. Once that tone is established, changing it becomes difficult. And this isn't accidental, because casinos are private property with extensive authority over what happens on their floors. Court filings in assault and injury cases repeatedly show delays between an incident occurring and police being notified. Sometimes those delays are short, sometimes longer, but the window exists. During that window, witnesses are separated, statements are collected by casino staff, and surveillance footage is reviewed internally, which means the narrative is already forming before law enforcement enters the picture. By the time officers arrive, the situation has often been reframed, classified, and partially resolved. Early classification shapes everything that follows. An incident described internally as a disturbance often stays a disturbance, even when guests believe it crossed into something more serious. This process is legal, structured, and extremely effective at limiting exposure. In multiple lawsuits against major Strip resorts, guests alleged assault or serious injury tied to security failures, yet many of those cases never moved forward as criminal prosecutions. Instead, they shifted into civil litigation, where outcomes are quieter and public visibility drops sharply. Once a case enters the civil system, there is no arrest photo, no criminal verdict, and no sustained media coverage, which means the public rarely connects the dots. The incident didn't disappear, it moved into a process designed to resolve disputes without attention. This pattern appears repeatedly in court records involving casinos, hotels, and nightlife venues on the Strip. Claims of inadequate security, delayed response, or failure to intervene show up again and again, and many are resolved through confidential settlements. That is why tourists often assume these events are rare, even though the legal record suggests otherwise. Employee testimony and investigative reporting have also shown that guest value affects enforcement decisions inside casinos. High rollers generate enormous revenue, and that reality changes how incidents are handled. Security teams are more likely to de-escalate rather than eject, staff are encouraged to smooth over situations, and tolerance thresholds shift when a guest's lifetime value is high. This isn't immunity, but it is prioritization, and it creates a two-tier system most guests never see. Court testimony in employment-related cases has shown that hosts and managers are aware of these distinctions, because losing a high-value guest carries financial consequences. That awareness shapes behavior, even when policies appear neutral on paper. This is where fairness quietly breaks down, not through official rules, but through incentives. Employee-related misconduct is one of the most consistently suppressed categories on the Strip. When theft, drug use, or serious rule violations are discovered, casinos often terminate employment rather than pursue criminal charges. Court filings and investigative reporting show this pattern clearly, because public arrests raise questions about hiring practices, training, and internal controls. Firing resolves the immediate problem quietly, while prosecution invites scrutiny. Sexual harassment complaints follow a similar path. In high-profile cases involving senior casino executives, including lawsuits tied to Wynn Resorts, allegations were resolved through confidential settlements and non-disclosure agreements. What matters is not the individual scandal, but the structure, because those agreements delayed public awareness for years. That same structure applies to lower-profile employee complaints across the Strip. Silence becomes the default outcome. Slip-and-fall lawsuits are among the most common legal actions filed against Las Vegas resorts. Court records repeatedly cite wet floors, broken escalators, malfunctioning elevators, poor lighting, and delayed repairs. These cases rarely make headlines because they are settled quietly. Yet, taken together, they reveal a pattern tied directly to deferred maintenance and cost control. Rather than proactive repairs, issues are often addressed only after injuries occur. I've talked at length about the decline of hotel resorts and casino premises in my recent videos. OSHA citations against casino operators have documented unsafe conditions for employees, including maintenance-related hazards, which often overlap with guest safety risks. Those citations exist on paper, but they rarely enter public conversation. What guests experience as inconvenience is often a known liability behind the scenes. Deaths inside Strip properties do occur, most commonly from medical emergencies and accidents, with a smaller number involving violence. When deaths can be classified as non-criminal, public disclosure is minimal. There may be a brief police statement, sometimes a short local mention, and then the story ends. Follow-up coverage is rare, especially when the person involved was visiting from out of town. One documented example involves a visitor who traveled to Las Vegas in 2014 and disappeared shortly after time in the city. Initial media coverage appeared, but as days turned into weeks, public attention faded. Years later, his remains were identified in California, which technically closed the case, but did little to renew national attention or answer lingering questions. The resolution happened quietly, without sustained public discussion. This illustrates a larger structural issue. Las Vegas is built around constant turnover, which means when a visitor disappears or dies, there is rarely a local community pushing for long-term answers. Families return home, tourists move on, and once the city keeps moving, attention fades even when questions remain. Missing person cases tied to Las Vegas often lose visibility faster than similar cases elsewhere for this exact reason. There's no neighborhood advocacy, no long-term local pressure, and no sustained media focus once visitors leave town. Deaths classified as medical follow the same pattern. Local reporting and police statements confirm that when no criminal suspicion exists, incidents inside casinos and hotels are rarely revisited publicly. Once a death is labeled non-criminal, the case effectively closes in the public eye. This does not mean nothing happened. It means the classification determined how much the public would ever hear. Vegas does not erase problems. It resolves them privately and moves on. It did not suddenly become reckless. It became thinner. That thinness shows up everywhere guests interact with the city. Security feels stretched, service feels colder, and problems feel closer to the surface. People notice, even when they cannot explain why. Las Vegas is built to absorb problems quietly, protect revenue, and preserve the illusion of control, even as costs are cut and systems strain. If Vegas feels off, colder, or less magical than it used to, this is why. Have you been to Vegas lately? Have you felt a shift? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe.